Now to kick us off with the hardware overview as it relates to tape, we have Mr. Matt Nimesling, who is our Senior Director and Tape Portfolio Manager. So Matt, are you with us?
I am. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot. So as Bob said, Matt Nimesling, and I've been working at Spectra for a little over 20 years now, primarily focused on tape. So, I've built tape libraries, I've managed the engineering group, and now I'm managing more of the overall tape portfolio. We've been baking tape libraries for a little over 30 years now, and that's, manufacturing them, designing them, supporting them, so we have a lot of experience in this area. Today, our major tape library line is made up of three primary libraries, so the Spectra stack, the T950, and the T-Finity. We still do offer and both sell and support some of our more legacy products, the T120, the T380, the T680. Those can still, for some customers, those are the right product. But these three on the screen right now are really what we're focused on, and these meet pretty much anything a customer needs from a tape library standpoint. So with the Spectra stack, and I'll go into more details on Spectra stack in a few minutes, it can scale anywhere from 10 slots to 560. And then if you need something bigger than that, we go up to the T950, where you can start out at say 50 slots and go all the way up to 10,000. And then if that's not big enough, you go into T-Finity, and in T-Finity you've got dual robotics and high availability and all these very enterprise features. You can support LTO, TS, and T10K if you want in the same library. And that'll scale all the way out to 55,000 slots. So, huge amounts of storage in these tape systems. And they can really be tailored to meet any need that you have. So, we can customize it. We can really make it exactly what you need for your exact situation. So to start out real quick, I wanted to start with a poll. And that is, what is the most important attribute that you will consider when looking at future tape archive systems? So what's most important? Lowest cost per terabyte, maximum throughput per tape drive, or highest capacity per cartridge possible? So
Perfect.
we'll give you guys yeah, thanks, Katie.
I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll right now. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to submit your responses, and then we'll display the results. Perfect. We've got a lot of responses coming in. We'll leave this open for another 15 seconds. All right, get those responses in. I'm about to close the poll. All right, thank you, everybody. And here are the results.
Okay, and as Katie shows those results, Mr. Nimesling, it looks like under the category of lowest cost per terabyte, 55% are considering that an important attribute. Maximum throughput per tape drive, 30%, and highest capacity per cartridge, 16%. Is that along the lines of what you would expect, or what would you say about that?
I actually think that makes a lot of sense. And really, one of the main reasons that people continue to use tape is it's the lowest cost per terabyte for real archive storage. So if you're going to have huge amounts of bulk storage, tape really makes a lot of sense for that. And the main reason you want to use it is lowest cost. There's all these other attributes like air gap, genetic diversity of storage media, things like that. But, we always come back to tape is the lowest cost per terabyte to store large amounts of data. So that actually does make a lot of sense.
And I guess when you're looking at an archive system, you're also looking at having multiple copies. So that's when that cost per gigabyte gets very sensitive as well.
Yep, and if you needed to, you can take one offsite or something like that, which tape has been known for years. So lots of ways to protect your data by using tape, and by feeling more free to make multiple copies and stuff like that because of the cost.
Gotcha.
So let's jump into Spectra Stack. Spectra Stack's our newest tape library. It's been out for about 2 years now. And Spectra Stack really fills that part of the market where, you need tape, but you don't want to get into this large enterprise tape library that can store, thousands of tapes possibly. So if you have a business and you need, 10 to 50 or 100 or 500 tapes, Stack works great. And it's also, dense, it fits in a rack, it goes into your standard data center, it can just fit in with all your other equipment. So it does scale. It starts with a 6U box, and that 6U box holds 80 slots, and then it can go all the way up to 7 of those and get up to 560 slots in a rack. It can go from 1 to 42 half-height tape drives, but it does support both half-height and full-height drives. You can do 21 full-height or 42 half-height maximum in a stack. And this is what it would look like if it is a full rack full of stacks. The main control module has a color LCD and a remote interface to it that you can do anything from the front panel you can do remotely as well. Like I said, you can go up to 7 modules in a rack. And with LTO-8, even though this is a rack mountable, smaller, lower end tape product, that's almost 7 petabytes uncompressed. So still a huge amount of data for most organizations. And then, if you think about if you were to put 42 half-height drives in there, you could actually do almost 13 gigabytes per second. Again, that's a ton of throughput if you really needed to read or write a lot of data to a tape library at once. SpectraStack does have integrated library management software, and it's based on our Bluescale software that we use across the entire tape library product line. It's been adapted to work a little bit better on this size LCD and on this stackable product, but it offers all those same features. So the same media lifecycle management MLM functionality that you have on all the enterprise libraries you get in Stack, and it works between tapes that are transitioned between those libraries. Same thing with our standard encryption. So if you need to encrypt data on tape, you could encrypt it on a T950, and then you could read it back on a stack if you needed to, or vice versa. And then it also supports all the other, encryption type softwares like KMIP, ESKM, all those other packages. Even though it's a lower end tape system, it's been designed to be very reliable. So with a stack, it's rated 100% duty cycle. This isn't something where, you can only use it 8 hours out of the day or something. You can run this thing 24/7 if you want to. It's at a 3 million MCBF and 1 million demonstrated mechanical life. So that means it's going to last a long time. 1 million demonstrated is, we've actually tested individual units up past 1 million cycles, so it's not an MCBF calculation. It has 80 plus silver rated power supplies. Very simple to install, and most users do that themselves as well. So you don't need, professional services or other people to come on site. You can have one up and running in about an hour yourself. Another feature that we offer with SpectraStack that is very unique is Migration Pass. And with Migration Pass, if you have an older tape system from SpectraLogic or from another manufacturer, we'll take a look at the, what kind of drives they are and make sure that they would work in a stack. But if they do, you can take those drives from the older tape library from whichever vendor it is, put them into the SpectraStack drive sleds, and then install them in the SpectraStack to use to migrate your data. So if you have, older LTO5 drives and some LTO, 4 and 5 tapes, you could put those LTO5 drives, those older tapes, into the stack, and then you could put new LTO8 drives and do your migration and only have one tape library on site. So you don't have to keep the old one for a long time just to migrate your data off of. And this is a pretty unique offering with SpectraStack and SpectraLogic in general. When you get up above the SpectraStack, we go into our TerraPack-based libraries, and those are the T200, 380, 680, and the T-Finity, 950 and T-Finity. And those all use the TerraPack, and the TerraPack is a plastic tray that holds either 9 TS or 10 LTO tapes. Some of the benefits of the TerraPack are it makes the library very dense. We have a really good terabytes per square foot kind of footprint with the system. It also makes moving media around very efficient, whether it's inside or outside the library. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail on the T950 and the T-Finity in the HPC section this afternoon, so please come back for that. That's where we're really going to dive into T-Finity and talk about performance and features and what the library can do that no other tape libraries out there can today. And that's useful both in HPC and in a lot of other markets. Like David talked about, our tape systems are all compatible with pretty much everything out there. That goes for all the standard, backup packages like Backup Exec and Net Backup, Commvault. It also works with all the, the larger HSM type systems like HPSS, DMF, Versity, as well as our StoreCycle and BlackPearl products, which then can connect to a whole lot of other clients that allow them to use tape as well. And on all the tape libraries, everything is built in. So that is kind of a differentiator that you don't see in all the other libraries on the market today. With the Spectra tape systems, you get all the features. You get media lifecycle management. You get standard encryption. You get drive lifecycle management. You get partitioning. You get remote interconnects. And there's no other licenses. There's no other support contracts or anything else that goes along with that. As long as you buy the product, you get to pretty much use all the features. And that's just how it works. And some of those, like media lifecycle management, where we track the health of every tape in the system and update it over time, you know, that's a very valuable feature. And it's something where, you know, historically with tape, those are the things that people worry about. Is my data out there in my archive good? So if you combine features like media lifecycle management and data integrity verification, where you can automatically do a test of a tape in the background, that really means you can have that peace of mind to know that all your data out in your archive is good. And you know, we've been developing these and adding to these year over year in Bluescale. And as we come out with new code, as long as you have a tape library that's under support, you get every new feature that we add into it. Another trend we've been seeing a lot more of in the last probably 5 or 6 years is a move away from a historical SAN. So, you know, in the past, most of your large storage in many of these environments were on the SAN, and they were all attached via fiber channel, and that worked really well. But we've seen this large transition to where now most new data centers, everything is connected on this very high-speed, large Ethernet backbone. And that's a lot driven by cost and commonality of parts and newer, you know, NAS storage and object storage, which has really driven a lot of that demand. But that also means that one of the last things in these large data centers that has fiber channel in a lot of cases is the tape library. And does that make sense or not? So if you look today, Ethernet, you know, it's up to 200 gig is shipping now. 10 gig of Ethernet is basically built into most newer processors. There's a lot of different vendors that sell NICs, switches, HBAs, and it has the lowest cost per port from a performance standpoint. And that's really comparing it to fiber channel. So with fiber channel, there's, you know, maybe 2 vendors left out there. The roadmap's moving much slower. And it's just, it's not going at the same pace as what you see with Ethernet. The other big difference is that historically with Ethernet, there's really just primarily been iSCSI for a storage standpoint for a protocol. And iSCSI works well. It works on a lot of different systems, a lot of different OSs, but it has a lot of overhead. So that means that you can't transfer as much data efficiently over an Ethernet using iSCSI. Something that's changed in the last few years is there's been some newer technologies that came out, like Rocky, RDMA over Converged Ethernet, that's based on ICER, the same kind of base technology that InfiniBand is based off of. And that allows you to essentially do a memory-to-memory transfer between 2 processors or 2 systems and really efficiently move a large amount of data without all that overhead that you had with iSCSI. So how does that help you? What does that do for tape at this point? Well, that's where SpectraLogic, we've come out with a new product called Swarm. And what Swarm is it's an Ethernet to SAS bridge. And how that bridge works is there's 2 40 gigabit Ethernet ports on the back of the bridge, and then 4 wide SAS ports for 16 SAS connections on the other side of the bridge. So now it's transitioning from a SAS tape drive to an Ethernet infrastructure. And from a host or data center standpoint, that makes it appear as if the entire tape system is now connected via Ethernet. You can use ADI through the tape drive, which allows you to export the robotics or the tape system out of the drive, so you don't need any separate controllers. And so through the drive out to the host, and now you have a completely Ethernet attached tape system. So now you've eliminated fiber channel from your environment. Especially now that you have something like Rocky, we can support up to 16 drives through an individual Swarm controller. So with Rocky, we can get 300 megabytes a second or more to all 16 drives using the Swarm bridge. And this is really a unique thing now. So if you look at fiber channel, a lot of the cost is in switches, in HBAs, and even in personnel that have to, you know, manage that SAN and know what to do with fiber channel and how to do zoning and all this stuff. Whereas you're going to definitely have network admins. You're going to have people that understand how to manage an Ethernet infrastructure. So if you can just move everything over to that, you've actually saved a lot of costs overall from your complete system standpoint, and you've made your data center a simpler, more easy to understand environment for a lot of people that will be using it. So next up, we're going to hit another poll here. Do you see the use of fiber channel increasing, decreasing, or staying the same in your data center environment? So Katie, if you want to take that.
You got it. I'm launching this right now. All right, we will leave this open for 30 seconds for you to submit your responses, and then I will display the results again. All right, 13 more seconds to submit those responses. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and display those right now.
All right, let's see what we got here. Okay, so do you see the future of fiber channel increasing, decreasing, or staying the same? Increasing, we got 25%, decreasing 44%, and staying the same 32%. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
That one also, that actually does, you know, we've done some of these polls. We've talked to a lot of people at trade shows and other places, and that's kind of what we've heard from most customers out there. We see, in general, it's probably going to decrease. We don't see it really increasing in many environments at all. And then there's also still definitely a number of customers that say, I've got fiber channel. It works really well. I'm happy with how that my systems and my network's all set up. I want to leave it the same. So that really does kind of resonate with everything we've heard up to this point. So for that, you know, that 40-some% that said, I see it decreasing, this is probably the right kind of thing for them to go look at and get more information on how do you move away from that fiber channel over to something else, especially if you're doing something like a hyper-converged infrastructure where all you have is Ethernet. Mm-hmm. Swarm really fits in there well, and that's kind of a unique place where you know, there isn't another good way to do it.
And of course, Matt, you can also build a SAN using Ethernet versus fiber channel. So do you see a lot of people still sticking with the concept of a dedicated storage area network, but using Ethernet instead of fiber channel as a switch on that?
Definitely, some people will do that. It depends on what kind of infrastructure you already have, what kind of equipment you already have, and whether you can utilize existing stuff in your network, or if you want to have a dedicated storage area network just for, you know, your storage or archive pieces.
Right. Okay, great. Back to you.
Another piece that goes along with all this hardware in the tape libraries is media. And SpectraLogic has a certified media program, and we've been doing this for many 4 or 5 generations of media now, where what we try to do with the media is make it the most pristine, best tape media you can buy. With our tape libraries, you can use media from anywhere. You can buy it online, you can buy it from, you know, whatever vendor you've always bought it from, or you can buy it from Spectra. And we don't manufacture the media. We use media from both Sony and Fujifilm, but we get that media and then we take it through a pretty advanced cleaning process and a certification process. And we do that on every single tape that we ship, whether it's TS or LTO. And how that works is we get media in, we bring it into this, this is our media processing facility in our manufacturing building in Boulder. We bring the media in, we let it acclimate for 24 hours, and then we load it up in one of these tape libraries. First it gets, the robot puts it into a cleaning drive where it gets cleaned. And that's a special proprietary process that we've developed over the years and you know, made better and better as different generations of tape and tape drives come out. After it gets cleaned, it then gets loaded into a standard LTO or TS drive, and it gets verified. So we do a full pass back and forth and make sure that that tape is good and that you know, it has the right capacity per wrap, and that the read-write error rate is as low as possible, and it meets all the criteria that we consider you know, ideal media. After that, we can go put we put either our certified barcodes on there, or we can make any kind of custom barcode a user wants, and that's based on number of digits, type of digits, colors, anything like that we can customize. And then we ship it out. And when we do that, that means that the media has a lifetime guarantee. So it's not that, you know, if you buy a tape from Spectra and 5 years later that tape has a problem, we will replace it basically no questions asked. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into making sure that media is good, and really then backing it up and supporting it as a company over the life of that media. So kind of to sum up the tape libraries, a lot of the things that are really important with the tape systems are that they're very tightly integrated with the ISV software. You want to know that if you buy a SpectraLogic tape library, it's going to work with whatever software package you need it to. And because we've been doing this for so long, we have a very large ISV test lab in Boulder. We've tested these things against basically anything you could use them with. We do support all the different drive technologies, and like I said, in the HPC section, we'll dive into that a little bit more, but in a T-Finity, if you want to, you can even put the T10K Oracle drives in there and use those to migrate your data off of the T10K tapes and onto either LTO or TS. So we have a lot of options that nobody else offers. We can scale both vertically with Stack or horizontally with T950 and T-Finity to make any size or capacity tape system that you would ever need. We can scale out to make the largest libraries in the world today. They're especially in the T-Fin, you have very fast and efficient robotics. So from a mount rate perspective, we can meet or beat any other tape library out there. And we've designed these things to where backward compatibility and a future-proof architecture they mean a lot. So if you buy a T-Finity today or a T950 today, we expect that library to be on your floor probably for 10, 15, 18, 20 years. You're going to upgrade pieces of it over time. You're going to add new tape drives. You're going to add a new robot that's faster, maybe a new faster controller. But the large library footprint is going to be there and probably expanded for years to come. We need to make sure that hardware is going to accept all those new things in the future. So we've always considered that as part of our design cycle as well. With that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to you, Bob, and see if there's any questions that are out there.
Yes, excellent job, Matt. Thank you. And quite a few questions. As a matter of fact, I think we've got about 10 right now, but continue to write them in. If we can't get to them, we'll answer them individually after the event today. Some of these were already answered, I think, in your presentation, but I'm going to go through them all real quickly, Matt. Does Spectra Stack support hardware partitioning? That came in before you got to that slide, but could you just say another word or two on that?
Sure. So in the term hardware partitioning is maybe not exactly how we would describe it, but the Spectra Stack and all of the Spectra libraries support partitioning. And partitioning means you can basically carve the library up into different logical sections. Those show up to the host as a unique tape library. So it's attached to unique drives in that partition that nobody else can see. And you can divide that up however you want to. You could have a partition that has 2 drives and 10 slots, or you could have in another partition that has 8 drives and 200 slots. And you can go, I think in a Spectra Stack, you can go up to 20 partitions today.
Okay. Is software training available? And I believe this is when you were talking about Blue Scale software.
Yep. So with all the tape libraries, we have professional services options that you can purchase when you buy the library. With a Spectra Stack, that's not required. You can buy the library, you can install it yourself, and you can just start using it. You can get the user's guide. It's really simple to set up and use. With the larger libraries like the T950 and the T-Finity, we do come on site and we do a full installation. And as part of that installation, we're going to do some training on software. We also have separate training programs where if a customer wants to, they can come into Boulder for a week and do a full-on tech training on the library, and at that point they're certified to essentially do most service operations that any support tech would be able to do. So it's anywhere in between there that somebody would need.
Okay, great. Let's see, next up, and that the ability to partition, is that licensing included with the Spectra library, or is that an additional charge?
It's included with the library.
Okay, great. Let's see. Does Migration Pass work in conjunction with backup products, i.e. Commvault, to update their databases with the new tapes, barcodes, data, etc.?
Migration Pass, it's not, you don't really see it from the backup software standpoint. So you're going to have your new tape library. You're going to import all of those tapes. When you import those tapes, you're going to have Commvault attached to the library, and it's just going to see those tapes now as part of that system and those tape drives. So you're going to, part of the import process and the discovery process with the software package is going to now find those tapes with those same barcodes in the new library, and it's going to be able to use them. You could do that in the same partition, or you could create unique partitions, however works best.
Okay. And when you were discussing Swarm, the question came in, will there be support for more than 16 SAS drives?
Today there's not. Today there is a limit of 16 drives per swarm, but you can install multiple swarms on a tape library. So if you need more than 16 drives, say with a T950 or a T-Finity that support 24 drives in each one of those cabinets, you can put 2 swarm bridges on top of the chassis. We have a nice little rack mount kit that mounts on top of the chassis. You can attach the 2 swarm bridges, and then you could put 12 drives behind each bridge or something like that.
Okay. Is Spectra certified media warranted against damage and data loss? Would you do data recovery?
We do help customers with data recovery if something happens. We typically, there's some level of it that we can do ourselves, and then at some point we may have to also bring in a third party. It depends on what happened to the tape, whether it's warranted for that or not. If if in your data center you had a fire, we're probably not going to be able to warranty against that. If the tape is just used in the library and over time it has a problem, it would be warranted for those kind of issues.
And I just want to clarify that that's the warranty on the physical media itself. No organization that helps you move or manage data can warranty the information itself. This is why we have multiple copies and disaster recovery and such. Okay, great.
It is the physical tape.
And I think you touched on this, but just to give us a confirmation again, can the libraries be used with media from other vendors? So could they get their media from someone other than SpectraLogic if they're using a Spectra tape library?
Yep, as long as you're, if you've got an LTO drive, you can use any LTO media. So we believe that the media, our certified media, is the best media you can buy, but you can use any LTO media from any vendor that you want to. It does not have to be SpectraLogic media in a SpectraLogic library.
Okay, great. Are your tape cleaners only for new tapes? I'm not sure what that was implying, but where would you take that question?
Yes, it is. So it's really designed, when you get a new tape or a green media, as part of the manufacturing process when they make media, there's tiny amounts of manufacturing debris that can get on that tape when it's made. And the cleaners are really designed to take that off. It's not designed to, take a tape that's been used for 100 passes and somehow got a bunch of gunk on it to clean that kind of a tape. So it's not made for media that's been written to like re-clean.
Okay, great. What's the max tape number exchanges in a T-Finity library?
So right now with a T-Finity and all the performance features turned on, so either a software package that supports zoning or dual or multiple partitions, using slot IQ, all soft load, all the features on the T-Finity, we can get up over 400 mounts per hour. And that's random mounts of any tape in the system. It's not just tier 1 tapes or anything like that.
Gotcha. Another question, what are the power requirements? Now that just came in kind of across the board, but I think it was from some of our larger tape libraries. I don't know if you've got that exact stat, but what would you say about that?
So there's a lot of ways you could run power. On the large libraries, we require 208 to 240 volt AC. We also then have options for a PDU that we've designed, so you could run 3-phase power, and that could be different type, line to line, line to neutral, 3-phase. So it really depends on what your power environment looks like. We've adapted it to work with most systems out there, or most data center systems out there.
Okay. Says, impressed with lifetime warranty for media. How long is the normal lifespan of media?
I mean, if you look, LTO tape is theoretically good for 30 years. Most customers only keep tape around for 10 to 15 years, roughly. And a lot of that is really based on the newer capacities of tape as they come out with new generations. At some point, you really want to migrate because you could take, 10 of your old tapes and put them on one new tape if you've waited 3 generations or so. And that comes down to slot count and performance and all those other things. As well as at some point you're not going to have a drive that'll read that old tape anymore. Today LTO 1, 2, 3 drives aren't supported any longer. So you could still have data on those tapes, but an LTO 6 drive isn't going to read an LTO 3 tape. And now you're in trouble, right? So you'll migrate between 10 and 15 years, if not sooner.
Okay, great. We're probably going to have to cut a couple of these short and we'll answer directly, but I do want to get 1 or 2 more in. Let's see. It says Spectra has plans to implement Ethernet across to individual drives specifically for models like the T200. So some of the older models of the tape libraries, will Swarm be supported on like a T200?
So today at T200, you can buy new LTO7 or LTO8 SAS tape drives and put them in the T200 and then use the Swarm bridge with them. So it requires a SAS tape drive, and as long as you have a SAS tape drive in your library, the Swarm LTO7 or LTO8 SAS tape drive, then the Swarm bridge will work with it. Whether it's a T200 or a T380 or a T950 or a stack or a T-Finity, any of those.
Okay, great. What levels of encryption are supported on the libraries?
So the actual encryption takes place in the tape drive. There's a hardware encryption chip, and that's where the actual encryption takes place. The library supports, we have our own key management, which is boost scale key management, and we have a standard and an enterprise version of that. And then we also support other key managers like ESKM, SKLM, some of the more enterprise standalone encryption key managers.
Okay, great. We've still got several other questions, but in the sake of time, what we're going to do is answer those directly and individually. So do look for responses from any questions that you've written in. But we're going to move to our next hardware feature, and that is going to be around our BlackPearl solution. And we have got Mr. Steve Paulson. We're going to get somebody who's spent a decade or more out there in the field, putting these things together, making these solutions work, bringing all the pieces and parts in place. And Steve is our senior solution architect, so he's had quite that type of experience in the field. So Steve, you're going to cover Spectra's BlackPearl. Now, BlackPearl is both a NAS solution as well as object storage, right? So you're going to cover both of those aspects?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. We'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We're pretty excited about our product portfolio, and we really understand who we are and where we fit. And so, like Bob said, I'm a senior solutions architect. I've actually been with Spectra for only about 5.5 years. In terms of Spectra years, I'm still a relative new guy, but I've worn pretty much every hat under our professional services umbrella. So from post-sales to management and now in pre-sales. So I get to talk with a lot of our customers, a lot of our partners, really understand the needs of the marketplace, and I'm pretty excited about what Spectra's got. So like Bob said, I'm going to be covering our BlackPearl product, which comes with a couple different personalities, if you will. First, we're going to talk about network attached storage. That's sort of the simpler personality. And then we're going to go into BlackPearl's ability to be an object storage gateway that can leverage tape on the back end. Not just tape, we can manage disk as well, cloud copies, remote replication. We've got an open and very well documented API that's based on S3. We kind of built on top of the S3 command set. I'll talk a little bit about that. But as an object storage gateway, BlackPearl has really seen a tremendous amount of success and really a huge impact in the archive market because it represents a completely different way to manage and interact with tape. So we'll get into that. First, I want to give you a little bit of context. I tend to be a contextual thinker. I'm sort of an analogy guy. And so as we talk to you about our products today, we're probably going to be using some terms, and I just want to make sure that we're using terms in a sort of a mutually understood way. So when we talk about tiers of storage, particularly tier 0, tier 1, what we mean is really fast, really expensive, really kind of capability focused, products that are built around being able to handle a very high and I/O workload, heavily randomized workload, things like live databases or a shared media edit storage platform, or if you're in the analytics and supercomputing space, that compute level storage that's really phenomenally responsive to all of that fast processing. So that's kind of the tier 0, tier 1 space. That's the flash systems, all the cutting edge stuff that's out there. That's what we mean when we say tier 0 and tier 1. As we describe ourselves, and as I get into our discussion about NAS, particularly our NAS, but all around our disk platforms especially, I'm talking about tier 2. Now this is not lesser in quality. This is a truly enterprise quality platform, but Tier 2 has a different focus. It's affordable, it's reliable, it's really capacity and density focused. It's architected for large sequential reads and writes, and that's what makes our disk a really outstanding and very affordable backup and archive target, or a digital parking lot for finished projects of any kind, whether you're an M&E or HPC. This is the kind of terminology, and this is what we mean. So for a lot of applications, you really need that race car. You know, you need it to be able to turn on a dime, start and stop very quickly. For other applications, you know, going to the lumber yard, so to speak, you really want that truck, right? Loaded up with a lot of data, and we can move a lot of data between points A and B very quickly with large sequential operations. So I wanted to set this as context for the discussion, particularly around our disk. The other thing that I want to do, I want to introduce a term here, and I don't recall if David used this term, but we talk a lot about the perpetual tier of storage. Within the high-performance computing space, this is kind of a very common concept, maybe not known under this name, but it's a multi-tier strategy, primarily a two-tier strategy where your primary tier of storage is focused on the really hot data. It's the data that is highly transactional. It's what's being computed against right now. But that perpetual tier, it's lower cost, it's higher density, but as we build out perpetual tiers of storage, we're doing things to really ensure that the data is very accessible. You might think about this as archive. That term tends to have a little bit of baggage associated with it, but the perpetual tier is all about really securely storing your data, making sure you've got multiple copies. It's really well protected, but it's also really easily accessed. There's the ability to move data to and from the primary tier out of the perpetual tier, and giving you a storage infrastructure that's really limitlessly scalable, and you don't have to sort of break the bank with new storage purchases. You know, we study data, we study the data of the world, and we understand how quickly data is growing. And we also understand that budgets are not growing at the same kind of rate. And so we're going to be talking about these things as we go throughout the day. And this certainly impacts what I want to talk about with BlackPearl NAS. So as was mentioned earlier by David, our NAS is really truly scalable. We can start with a small 2U system at 44 terabytes, and we can scale all the way up, filling an entire rack and hit about 16 petabytes of capacity. We do that through incredibly dense JBOD expansions that hold 107 drives. That's after the master node. The 4U holds 35. Then we start tacking on 107 drive 4U JBODs, and that's how we really build that density. And we've got a huge array of actually 5 different drive types that we can use within our NAS. Our most popular right now is our 16 terabyte enterprise SATA drive. Really, truly an outstanding drive. It's been performing exceptionally well in the field. So few problems, and it really is an enterprise class drive, and allows us to hit that kind of density. But we also have a self-encrypting drive option that's a 12 terabyte enterprise SAS drive. So if you have a requirement for encryption at rest, we can architect it with that drive as well. Inside the system, we've got a really smart stack of software that gives us very flexible parity options, and we'll show you a little bit what that looks like. We're not bound by sort of the rules of the old hardware RAID controllers. This is a software-defined RAID, and it gives us really incredible flexibility. Part of that is intelligent rebuilds. If a drive does go down, we're not, you know, like the old hardware RAID systems, we're not rebuilding an entire drive, including all of the empty space. We're intelligent enough to know only the bits and bytes that we have to rebuild onto a spare. Support for sys and NFS, Active Directory within Windows. We can configure snapshots, volume-based replication. We can attach this with single or dual 10 or 40 gig interface. And you know, we can really move a lot of data, again, architected for those large sequential operations, large sequential writes, large sequential reads, and we can really sustain a very high level of throughput when this is used in the right application. Just a quick look at the simplicity of the user interface. Now, we understand that, you know, most of the time you don't want to be managing your various tiers of storage. And if you come back to this NAS system after not even having looked at it for 6 months, we want to present an interface that's very intuitive, that you don't have to go and read a voluminous manual in order to understand how to set up another pool. So this is our pool creation wizard. You give the pool a name, you set a watermark, and this is where the system tells you, kind of gives you a heads up that, hey, you're running out of space. But this is then what that flexible parity section looks like. We can select the number of drives that we want to include in a pool. And a pool is just a physical collection of drives, and we can tell the system how many we want to use in a particular pool. We can select the parity level that we want, and then we've got optimization options where we can drag the slider back and forth, and it rearranges the stripes, fewer stripes with more drives, and it updates the storage pool preview so that you can understand before you create this pool what your available versus overhead is going to be. It really is just that simple. This takes only a minute or two once the system is racked and powered up, creating a pool, volumes, and then shares or NFS mounts, and you're writing data into the system literally within minutes. It's incredibly easy to use. We do use thin provisioning, so once we set up a pool, we can create multiple volumes, and those volumes are just sort of a logical slice of the physical space. But if you want to, you can pre-allocate space to particular volumes, but generally we advise you to just let the system manage that. And so the pool sort of doles out space on those drives to each volume as they need, so that you can really maximize the efficiency of the storage space that you've purchased. Everything is copy on write, so if you're overwriting an old file, you're not actually overwriting it, you're creating a copy on new space, and we're just moving the index, and so those snapshots can roll back to prior states of the array. And again, we can configure volume-based replication for disaster recovery. So really incredibly easy to use and simple to set up. So Bob, I'm gonna hand this over to you, and let's take a poll and kind of get a feel for where people are at with the tiers of storage that they have in their environment today.
Yep, and it's actually Katie Jones who's going to be running that poll for us. So Katie, we'll have you post that up.
You got it.
And here it comes. So what tiers of storage do you have in your environment today?
Beautiful. We have lots of responses coming in. I'll leave this open for another 15 seconds. All right, submit those responses, and I'm going to close this in 5 seconds and display the results. Thank you, everyone, for participating. There you go.
All right, let's see what we've got. Tier 0 and 1 only, 8%, so very low. Tier 1 and 2, 39%. 1, 2, and 3, 47%. Some other configuration, 7%. So, Steve, it looks like about half of our attendees are working with 3 levels, about 40% working with 2 levels, and then it falls out on either end.
Yeah,
and is that what you would expect?
Yeah, it really is, Bob. The realities of data storage, the explosive expansion of data today is really forcing people into a multi-tier model. And so what we're doing and what we're going to talk about now with BlackPearl as an object store really is aimed at making Tier 2 and Tier 3 just easier to use. And as we go throughout the day, especially talking about store cycle, we're going to be talking about how much that simplifies that picture. It can be a little bit of a task to manage multiple tiers of storage, so we're pretty excited about what we've got to talk about.
Yep.
All right, thanks. So we've talked about NAS. Again, it's a very simple picture, right? Just CIFS and NFS volume-based replication, some of those kind of enterprise quality features and functions that you would expect. But here's where BlackPearl just gets really interesting. There's a tremendous software stack built into BlackPearl that enables us to turn it on as an object storage gateway. Now, why would we do this? As Matt talked about, we've been in the tape business for a long time. We've understood all of the pain points that our customers have articulated to us. If you were a tape user sort of back in the day, you've probably got some stories of your own to tell. And what we really wanted to do was to give the market a completely different way to interact with tape, something that's far easier than historically possible. And we did that by creating an object store with a RESTful API based on S3 as a new front end to tape. Now, when S3 first came out, it kind of presupposed that data would be on disk and quickly randomly accessible. There was not an API that would allow the latency of tape. And what I mean by latency is that time to first byte, right? The robot has to mount a tape, the drive has to spin it up before data starts streaming out. Once it starts streaming, it's kind of a fire hose, but that time to first byte, that's what I mean by the latency. And so we needed to create an interface that could deal with the latency of that, and we did that by creating what we call Spectra S3. And as I'll show you, we've got a tremendous number of partnerships out in the industry, software partners that have developed integrations with BlackPearl using that Spectra S3 API. We're really excited about those partnerships, but we are really building out our ecosystem kind of with BlackPearl as a core. So what you see over here on the left is a couple clients that we developed, and these are free. These are on our website. You can download them. We don't charge for them. We don't charge you to use them. And most of our BlackPearl customers that have really automated workflows end up using one or both of these also, just because even though they're simple, they're really incredibly useful. Eon Browser is a drag and drop, and so you can literally drag and drop to and from tape by using object buckets on BlackPearl. But if you're more of a command line aficionado, then the Java CLI might be for you. It's command line driven with a tremendous number of options, puts a lot of that BlackPearl API right at your fingertips. Now you may say, well, I just don't want tape. You know, for whatever reason, tape is just not going to be part of the picture. That's okay. We can put disk behind BlackPearl. Now from a hardware perspective, it's the same drives and the same chassis as we use within the NAS space, but we're managing it in a completely different way, and we call it object storage disk. We can put these two side by side where you can have a permanent copy on tape and a temporary copy on disk. There's a really intelligent data management engine within BlackPearl that can deal with multiple copies and background migrations between different storage technologies. Really a phenomenal set of capability. We can also do remote archive replication. We've got a number of customers doing this already today, where they've got a BlackPearl and a tape library in two separate locations, two BlackPearls and tape libraries in separate locations, and those BlackPearls replicate bidirectionally to each other for disaster recovery. We can also create a copy out to your either AWS or Azure cloud target, again for disaster recovery purposes. Now, there's one issue that I want to address before we go even further. Within our NAS, we built in what we call a BlackPearl client, and these two things over here are BlackPearl clients. Within our NAS, we built a client as well, and this is enabled on a volume basis. We call it NFI, stands for Network File Interface. What this does is gives us the ability to snapshot an entire volume, and it's configured on a volume basis. We can snapshot that volume off to an object bucket, which is then written out to tape. And this is LTFS tape, right? This is an open format, so you don't have to have a BlackPearl to get this data back. You can put that tape in any standalone tape drive with LTFS drivers that you can get for free. So we're preventing that vendor lock-in. But NFI gives you the ability to either move or copy the contents of a NAS volume off to an object bucket. Now let me give you an example of where this might be useful. Let's say you've got your backup software writing to a NAS target here, and you want to create a blind offline external copy onto tape that not even the backup software knows about. You can enable that NFI policy to drop that data into a bucket and write it out to LTFS tape, and then you can externalize that tape. So that's just one example. There are a tremendous number of different uses that our customers have found for this NFI policy. Now what you're seeing here represents generally some manual workflows, right? Some manual ways of moving data in and out of BlackPearl and using the various storage targets. But what we're going to be talking about a little bit later, and I want to just drop a little bit of a teaser, is StoreCycle as a storage lifecycle management software to do data management and really help you keep your primary storage tiers clean and be able to do so on a very automated basis and utilize our storage targets, whether NAS or BlackPearl as an object store. So we'll be getting into more of that later today. Just to put a little bit of flesh on the bones here, in the backup sense, this is a very common picture. Probably most, if not all of you, would recognize exactly what's going on here. We've got really phenomenal partnerships in the backup space with these guys and more. But your backup application is looking at your primary storage, and it's backing up VMs, and it can use typically a NAS. Often it can use a tape target. And one of the things that we're talking about with customers is just enabling this object storage personality, creating a partition on the existing tape library, and then coming in with StoreCycle as a different way of helping to manage your historical data. So what StoreCycle is going to be aiming at is some of that aging data that hasn't really been accessed in a while. And so think about it this way: StoreCycle can peel off a tremendous amount of aging data that you have to keep around but just isn't being accessed. We can take that off in its native format, push that to an open LTFS tape, and at that point all of that data is completely free of any sort of vendor lock-in. It's completely independent, and it can, in a lot of cases, it can help your backups to run a lot more efficiently by just shrinking the world that your backup software really has to manage and protect, and it really allows them to focus on that hot data being part of that tier 0 and tier 1 paradigm. But this is an example, this is a classic example of beginning to build out a perpetual tier of storage for data that just isn't frequently accessed but needs to be easily accessible. StoreCycle is also able to make a cloud copy, right? Again, so just as you're thinking about a perpetual tier, how do I want to tune up my perpetual tier or re-architect it? I need to have part of a cloud strategy, but I need to keep some of my data on-prem. StoreCycle is going to be a great way to do it, utilizing either or both of BlackPearl's personalities here. Probably many of you are in the media and entertainment sector, and again, this is probably going to be a fairly familiar picture to you, regardless of what your asset management application is. You've got some very fast tier 0, tier 1 primary storage, and you very well may have tape in your as your archive target today. And typically, historically, it's taken a lot of what we call middleware, just a complex and often costly stack of software in order to manage that tape system. And so what we've done with BlackPearl is to take an appliance-based approach to replacing that level of complexity, giving you additional capability in terms of managing, in terms of managing that tape, and bringing all of that BlackPearl sort of baked-in goodness to bear with the various storage targets. So in a lot of media and entertainment customers, we actually do this pretty frequently, where we'll have a permanent copy on tape and maybe a 3 or 6 or 9 month copy of content on disk, so that any recently archived assets are immediately available because they can come flying off the object storage disk. You don't have to wait for a tape to be mounted up. It's a really common workflow, but then after a period of time it might be okay for this copy to just expire, knowing that we've got a permanent copy or multiple copies on tape here. But again, we can do that remote archive replication. We can push a copy out to the cloud. But another thing that we can also do is create workflows for assets that aren't well managed for whatever reason by your primary asset management application. And we can do that with the free clients. Again, most of our customers end up finding some kind of use for these guys because they're just so simple and just so useful. But we're also going to be talking about how StoreCycle fits into this to really help you manage and protect creative assets that may just not be well managed by your primary asset management application. This is just a snapshot of the various partnerships that we've built around BlackPearl. A lot of these are from the M&E industry. You may recognize some of these names, but not all. So we've got some really key partnerships in the general IT space, even in the high performance computing, that's able to make use of BlackPearl as a management front end for your tape. We're seeing a lot of activity now in the AI and machine learning and analytics space. And so we're really very excited about the level of capability that BlackPearl brings, whether as a NAS or as an object store that we can attach tape and disk and cloud and other things to. and how store cycle is going to fit into that. I can't wait for you to hear more about that. It's really exciting stuff. So Katie, I guess it's you. Let's fire up another poll. So what layers of a perpetual tier are most interesting to you today?
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and launch that right now, Steve. All right, we're going to give you about 25 more seconds to submit your results, and I'll display those shortly. Excellent. Go ahead and get those poll responses submitted. Steve, I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll in a few seconds here and display those results.
There's a little bit to think about in this one.
Just a little bit.
And here are the results.
Okay, let's see what we got. So at the top of the rank is Tier 2 Disk and Tape at 34%, Tier 2 Disk and Cloud at 27%, Tape and Cloud at 27%, Tape only is only 7%, and Cloud only is only 5%. So what do you think about that? Those are pretty interesting responses, Steve.
You know, it's interesting, but if I could have predicted, this would have been my prediction, because the need to sort of diversify, genetically diversify your perpetual tier, using some of these long-term data storage preservation kind of strategies, but really not wanting to be locked into any one strategy. Really outstanding results here based on what we see in the market. So thanks everybody for your responses on that. I think we've got maybe a little time for Q&A. Katie, how are we, Bob, or how are we doing on time?
Oh, we are. We've got a few minutes left, but then we've also got a break coming up. So we're going to, and we've had several questions come in, so I'm just going to start firing them off. Let's see. And we got a couple of questions to this effect. How is Spectra S3 different from S3? And we'll reiterate, pure or traditional S3 is usually AWS, Amazon Web Services. How do those differ?
Yeah, great question. So we had to build an API that would, I mean, you know, again, the focus was on the ability to work well with tape. And tape is a streaming media. It's a sequential media. It's a removable form of media. And so we really had to take into account, again, like I described, the latency of getting data back from tape. And so part of what we did there is to build in what we call bulk commands. So, you know, it would be the height of inefficiency to load a tape, spin it up, and write one file, and then unwind that tape and bring it back out, right? Once that tape is mounted in the drive, you want to be able to use it really efficiently. And so these bulk commands end up aggregating a lot of files together so that we can really be very efficient against the tapes that we have mounted in the drives. So that's just one example of how we needed to sort of build on top of Amazon S3. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, you might say, unfortunately, you can't just point your AWS SDK at BlackPearl and have it go. It just won't perform. So that's why we documented Spectra S3 so well. We've created software development kits around it and all the popular programming languages. We've got a number of customers that, you know, might use Python to script directly against BlackPearl's API. All of that information is on our website. We really want to make that very easy to use. So that's just a snippet of how Spectra S3 differs.
Gotcha. Then quickly, what about TSM, Tivoli Storage Manager, for tape management, backup, etc.? I see a lot of vendor names, but I didn't see that one. Now, TSM is currently marketed as Spectrum solution products from IBM, Spectrum Protect, Spectrum Archive. Full support there, correct, Steve?
So TSM works very well with our tape libraries. We've got a number of installations out there, but TSM has its own tape management kind of milieu. If you've studied TSM, you understand how broad and complex of an ecosystem that it is. BlackPearl isn't really of interest to them, right? They manage tape in their own ways, and so TSM has not created, or IBM has not created a Spectra S3 integration from Spectrum Protect, or TSM as it's often known. But they do make very good use of our libraries. We work very well together with them.
Okay, interesting. And I'm going to combine two questions here because one kind of leads to the next, although they're from the same person actually. Okay, so would Black Pearl convert data into an object and store it on tape as an object? That's one question, because remember we said we write to tape in LTFS.
Mm-hmm.
And then Black Pearl S3, is it proprietary? Is it not locking the client, again, to a particular format? So
Yep.
let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, great combination of questions, Bob. Well done. So LTFS, it stands for Linear Tape File System. And LTFS, the structure of LTFS on a tape just happens to work really well for an object storage kind of methodology. So when we write an LTFS tape, we're putting the metadata into the LTFS index, and then we're writing out the data into the data partition. Now you could take that tape, it's 100% self-describing, and you could mount that into any other tape drive just with LTFS drivers, no Black Pearl, not even a Spectra library, and that would show up as an LTFS volume. It's a completely open standard, so there's absolutely no lock-in. We're not doing anything funny with the data. We're just writing essentially what would look to anyone else like an LTFS volume. So you can easily get your data back, you know, if you no longer have a Black Pearl or even a Spectra library. So I'm hoping that answers the question.
Yeah, I think we get the best of both worlds there. It's managed as an object, giving you that incredible scalability, but it's written in LTFS, giving you that total openness and lack of proprietary nature. Okay, great. And, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're not forcing you to interact with Black Pearl as an object store. We're using object storage kind of internally because it makes sense with the way that we want to solve the problem. But you know, through those Black Pearl Spectra S3 clients, you really end up with a very intuitive and easy kind of workflow. We're not forcing you to interact with anything strange. We're not doing anything strange with your data. We're keeping it very open.
Okay, I'm going to throw out two more because we're a couple of minutes over, but let's answer them quickly. Do you use encryption for remote archive replication?
We can use SSL for data in flight and then data on tape. You know, tape is very easily encryptable. There's a really strong encryption engine built right into the tape drive that we can leverage, and Matt touched on that a little bit. Then it's just about key management, but we can use SSL for data in flight.
Okay, and quickly, what about a disk-only archive?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to have tape. You can just have Black Pearl with object storage disk, and we can manage it that way. And you know what I didn't really get to touch on is Black Pearl's ability to do background migrations between different storage technologies, whether it be, you know, LTO 8 to LTO 10 or disk to LTO or things like that. But we absolutely have Black Pearl customers that are just using disk on the back end.
Okay, great. We've got a few more questions, but we're going to pause it there and we'll answer those questions directly.